All right, this is video 2 of the Nazgul5. So the first thing that we are going to do is make sure that the video transmitter and technically the receiver has an antenna on it, because you never want to turn a transmitter on. Rookie tip, never turn a transmitter on without an antenna on it. Now, this is kind of weird. They give you this little plastic thing that goes on the antenna so you can grip it better, but it doesn't fit very well underneath this tail piece. Now, it does fit, and it does help me get a better bite, and I can turn it enough that it's not going to come off. But I would say I'd give that like a 5. I'd give that like a 5 out of 10 for planning, maybe a 7 out of 10. So another couple things to look at that make this a big deal are, this is a dead cat, so you won't be able to see the props. It's not a true X, so it's going to fly slightly different, but it's definitely going to keep the props out of view a little more than the normal X configuration on this. My other Nazgul is a true X configuration, so I'm curious to see the difference in how they fly. One thing that I would have liked to have seen on these is solder pads on the arms so that you don't have to desolder the motors all the way from the speed controller. It just makes it an easier solder if you have these solder plates that go right here. They're called soldered pads. They're by Luminaire. I've got a video that shows you, there'll be a link somewhere. Whatever. There won't be a link. There'll be a link somewhere. The link will show you sort of how to use them and why they're so great, and how to put them on your quad for quicker and easier changes, as well as a sort of a newbie video on explaining soldering and how that works, but that's neither here nor there. So that being said, the next step is going to be putting on some of these standoff pads. I'm going to take this off just to get it out of the way. And I'm going to put these standoff pads on. It looks like, let's see what this one says. This one says, warning, I'm pre-tuned to bind and fly. Just bind and fly. Well, we'll see. Let's actually try this. Let's see. Let's leave this here and let's see if that's true, because it definitely wasn't true on my last Nazgul. So this type of thing is great. If this is true, this gives a +2 to newbie drone startup, and even more reasons to buy this drone. I don't believe this is going to be true, but we will find out. This sticker says, man, your eyes are terrible. It says, angle mode, self-balancing level mode, enabled by default to make sure your first flight doesn't end in a mess. So that's typical. Pro tip, rookie tip is what I'm going to start calling these, because that's what I am, is there is no such thing as acro mode or 3D mode. It's the lack of mode. So if you don't have angle or horizon mode set, by default, it's in 3D mode. So if you're confused and you are in beta flight and you cannot figure out why you can't find that special mode so you can do all these tricks like the pros, you just have to have one that has no mode, and that's how you get into that mode. So the pads are going on, and you get 2 sets, which is pretty cool. This one does not go there. So this looks like it's going to have an LED in it. So you got to put the right pads in the right spot, I guess. This is fancy. There we go. So we are not going to put the props on. Never put the props on while you're in this. So the next step is going to be, let's get a battery. Let's plug it in and see if this baby connects straight up. So if you look at the sides, this has protective plastic on all sides. And one of the things that I read that is the reason for this protective plastic is that when you are in a rotating out laid out pattern in the front, that can throw rocks into the side or grass in the side. If you're when you're in turtle mode, it's going to go the opposite direction, and that will actually throw rocks in the inside. And the theory is that rocks can ping the top of your components in here and tear it up. Now, I think it just looks cool, and it just makes a little more sense. This says that it's link and ready to go, so I say we try it. Let's see if iFlight is going to get another +1. So let's just grab the controller. Okay, so we've got the goggles, and they're already on. Nothing else in the house is on, so I know that it's not going to show anything in the controller except a black screen. In order to turn the goggles on, it's one short and then one long press if you're having troubles with that. So at this point, we're going to see if it is indeed ready to connect and ready to fly out of the box like the sticker said. So we will single press. First, we'll plug the power in. Now we will press this. The bind button is pressed. We will double press the bind button on the goggles. Pro tip, rookie tip actually, it's not really one bind, it takes 2 presses. So it says in the manual to press once, but for these connections you typically have to press twice. This won't reach. Magic. Double press. So it says it stopped. It says above device is not activated. Connect the Dji Assistant to activate. So it said bind and fly, but we are going to have to connect it. So even though the packaging says that it's ready to fly, just bind it and go, the first thing you're going to have to do is register your DJI product. I don't know if we're going to have to plug the flight controller in, but we will find out after I do this. So the first thing to note is that there are 2 covered holes. One says FC and the other says air. So we're going to open the air unit port, and we are going to plug in our battery because the air unit won't operate without the battery. When the battery is in, it should operate in low power mode. So we're going to plug this in, and you'll hear your computer. So at this point, you are going to open your DJI Assistant. So at this point, we're plugged into the air unit, and we're going to go into our CADX Vista, into our DJI Assistant, and we are going to click on the air unit, start activation, confirm your account. I have read, next. I have read, confirm, and it will activate. Now, once activated, the question is, do we update it? Now, it said it's plug and play. Now, I'm going to assume that it's just the controller that's plug and play. So here's a little X. It's downloading. Typically, you would run a fan on this unit. Now, the DJI Air units are usually in low power mode by default when it's not armed, which means that it's not broadcasting with very much power right now, so it's not getting as hot as it likely could. So it shouldn't overheat, but I have seen these units in just a few minutes overheat and shut down while doing this, in which case you need to get out a fan and set it on the fan so it can get some airflow through the unit. Now there's a bug that it can get to 95% or so and just hang. And then it'll say it lost connection. But when you're done, it actually completed. It just lost connection before the last reboot. So we'll see what happens here. This should just update. Then we should be able to bind and be ready to test it. So this is that point around 95 to 97% where I've seen it hang, and eventually it'll just say it lost connection. I don't know if I should stop it during the upgrade or just let it go. The heat is one of those things that I sort of worry about in this scenario. Typically, I've just left it for 5 minutes and it finally says that it stopped communicating. And after I close it, it will go back to the recognize screen, to the initialization screen, and there will be a current icon next to it. That sounds like an overheat. I'm going to hit stop, shut it down, let it cool off, and plug it back in. The Assistant, and see if it lets me connect before it gets too hot again. Come on, air unit, pop up. It says current, so it did complete. So as you can see, I closed it and it marked it as complete. So now I'm going to unplug the unit and call this part complete. So the next thing would be to bind, but we need to let it sit for a few minutes to cool off because binding will also make the air unit very hot. So we'll be right back. Okay, now we plug this in and see if we can bind this air unit. Plug that in. Double click and long press this one. We're now active. Now I bound it before. And it stayed bound. So if you bind it before you update it, you have visuals. Yes. So that is all set. So now it's time to bind the controller. Same thing works with the controller. Single long press. Once this is on, what we're going to do is we're going to press the red button, the alternate button, and we're going to click this scroll wheel to bind. All three. Red button, alternate button, and scroll wheel. Not the button, the scroll wheel. Press this. It's in bind mode. Press these three. And we now have a green light. You can't see that it's green, but on my screen it's green. And we are bound and ready to fly, or at least test it.